Within mere days of each other, Saturn and Neptune station retrograde, bringing a lot of focus and attention to the Pisces sector of your chart. Saturn stations retrograde on June 29th, Neptune on July 2nd, and until December 2024, we will get a chance to separate facts from fiction, clear any misconceptions, and release any delusions that are holding us back. Let's take a closer look and break it down for all 12 signs. My name is Anastasia. I'm a traditional Western astrologer specializing in natal, relationship, and predictive readings. If you enjoy my work, please take a few seconds to show your support by leaving a like or a comment, subscribing, and pressing the notification bell. Watch another one of my videos. All of that helps to grow my channel, brings more views my way. You can also say thank you by buying me a coffee or tea or croissant. I highly appreciate that as well. Before we dive in, if you're curious to understand yourself better, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. I have natal chart readings which talk about your karmic purpose, your future, your strengths, weaknesses, etc. There are predictive readings like solar return or year ahead. There are relationship readings. You can even become a subscriber to receive monthly horoscopes sent to you at the start of every month. All of that is on my website. And on my website, in the shop section, you can find a variety of candles and oils, candles that I create because I like to be proactive. I got into astrology to help myself, and so I continue to help myself and help you in the process by creating magical candles and oils. In this video, I'd like to highlight my Saturn and Aquarius candle. We have had Saturn in Pisces since March 2023. And Saturn in Pisces is great for getting in touch with our feelings, but it can make it a little bit harder to get things done because we might be drawn to escape responsibility, versus Saturn in Aquarius is a candle that was created with Saturn conjunct Venus in Aquarius. It's very structured, very hardworking, very organized, Saturn in its true form. And this is really good for everyone who struggles getting focused right now, but especially good for people born with their Saturn in Leo, Cancer, or Aries, which are the signs of detriment and fall. So check this out on my website, Saturn in Aquarius. That's a great candle for you. Okay, so Saturn goes retrograde between June 29th and November 15th. It moves from 19 to 12 degrees Pisces, and you will feel it especially strongly if you have planets between 12 and 19 degrees of mutable signs: Pisces, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Gemini. So if you have those placements, you have had Saturn conjoin or oppose or square one of those placements, and now you're about to get the second round. And then the third one once Saturn stations direct. If you have planets in the first 10 degrees of those signs, you're very much done with Saturnian influence and you can breathe the sigh of relief. But for those of us, like me, who have a bunch of mutable planets, it's definitely another round. Neptune will be retrograde around the same time from July 2nd until December 7th, and Neptune will move from 29 to 27 degrees Pisces. So Neptune is hitting on same mutable placements: Virgo, Pisces, Gemini, and Sagittarius, but in this case from 27 to 29 degrees. You might notice the strong themes. So what does it mean that the two of those are going retrograde together? In order to understand it, let's just talk about each planet separately for a second, and then let's talk about the two together and what we might expect. Saturn is the lord of karma. Saturn is the last visible planet that is the boundary between what we can see and what we cannot see. And so Saturn has always been connected to structures, boundaries that restrict us, but also boundaries that protect us. Saturn often gets this negative reputation of sort of a no planet, a planet that's just like holding you back and doesn't let you accomplish things you want. But Saturn teaches you that things take time. Saturn puts pressure on you, but it kind of calls you to be realistic and to actually achieve things. You need Saturn in order to achieve things. If we only have Jupiter and Venus, we're likely to just chill and not do anything all day, right? So Saturn is like this like taskmaster, but also someone who's looking out for you. So Saturn being in Pisces is very much about following up on our dreams, connecting with our feelings, taking responsibility for our feelings, stepping outside of our own ego and focusing on other people and building community, building sort of connections with people that are soulful. When Saturn is direct, you may be dealing with external obstacles. You may be working on some duties that are sort of tangible, visible. When it's retrograde, your sort of progress becomes more internalized. You may have to address certain inner fears, inner restrictions, inner frustrations. So that's a little bit on Saturn. Neptune is actually not quite far from Saturn. Saturn is known for melancholy. Saturn is known for like nostalgia. Saturn actually has a bit of a romantic, like, sad quality to it that we get with maybe failed dreams or some kind of dissatisfaction, disillusionment. Saturn can be tied to like depression and, like I said, melancholy. And so Neptune is very much the planet of like dreams and ideals and illusions sometimes. It's very much the planet of imagination, of romance, of like poets and poetry. And so when Neptune in Pisces is also, I think, very much about our dreams, but also deception and delusion that comes sometimes. And so what I really like, I'm actually quite interested with these two going retrograde together, because I think like Saturn can be there to clear any misconceptions. It can help you take sort of ownership of any bad habits that you have, any sort of delusions you're feeding. It's all about like separating facts from fiction and getting clear and getting realistic. Even in June, this Saturn goes retrograde on June 29th and Neptune goes retrograde on July 2nd. But like the first 20 days of June, we had Gemini planets squaring Saturn and squaring Neptune, and then Jupiter will square Saturn in August as well. So there's a lot of this like mental chatter, new ideas, and some type of frustration represented by Saturn and Neptune, some type of delays, some type of confusion, maybe even sense of like impotence, like something you really crave and you really want to achieve and you have these ideas, but like maybe you cannot, right? And so when Saturn and Neptune go retrograde at the same time, you have to get realistic with yourself. Because it's retrograde, because it's internalized, you have to get clear about what can you do and what you cannot do. So Saturn and Neptune being retrograde could suggest that certain things are not working out because they're not meant to work out. Maybe you're meant to let go. Maybe you're meant to put the burdens down, right? If you felt overwhelmed, if you felt overloaded, you felt like there's too much on your plate, Saturn going retrograde could be the time to take a step back. Doesn't mean that you're giving up on the project, but maybe you just really need to like literally, retreat, calm down, build yourself a warm bed and take a nap in it, right? Versus some things you might need to double down on. Some things you maybe need to like recommit to and come up with solid structures. Like I keep thinking like structure with Saturn, Neptune, your dreams, right? Like structures towards getting closer to your dreams, like exercising at the gym, right? Exercising to build your muscles more, to get stronger. So Saturn going retrograde together with Neptune is like a bodybuilder that goes back and like works on their body, perfects it so that when the next tournament comes, he's ready. And this could apply to anything, right? Like this could apply to your journey with parenthood and trying to become pregnant. This could apply to your business model. This could apply to your health and like a lot of things. So like dealing with dealing with sort of structures in your life and figuring out which ones need to be released versus which ones need to be invested into. But also using some time to clear misunderstandings, clear misconceptions, deal with plans falling through around this time, deal with self-defeating tendencies, self-defeating habits, maybe certain duties that are harsh and difficult and you don't need to, they don't serve you. With these two retrograding together, you may have to address certain fears because once again, it's sort of like internal. What is holding you back? Why do you have certain fears? How deeply seated they are, right? Like together, Saturn and Neptune could be the time you come up with like strategy to nurture yourself, to do therapy, to talk about the past, to kind of get to the bottom of things and figure out what is holding you back, right? Like, because when we're talking about self-defeating habits, this could also be very much about being honest that, like you drink a little bit too much and maybe you need to slow down. But could also be about like that internal, what is stopping you, what is blocking you, what is like frustrating your progress. So understanding what's real and what's not real is very important here. And I'm gonna mention Astrology podcast. Austin Kopek and Chris Brennan were talking about Saturn and Neptune retrograde being connected to water and dangers surrounding water. So Saturn and Neptune being retrograde at the same time, Pisces being the sign of water and Neptune being the god of water, can bring up some type of like, even on the news, conversations around water supply, right? Like if you live in the US and the state that is sort of starved for water, there might be like fears and boundaries and structures that need to be put in place surrounding water. Might also be not the best time to go on like a cruise. Not, of course, I don't want to scare you. Most cruises will be fine, but like might also be the time you go on a cruise and you feel some kind of like fears come up in you. So let's talk about all 12 rising signs and describe what this might mean for you. If you want to know more, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. We can definitely dive in deeply into your natal chart and talk about these transits and so much more. If you are an Aries rising, Saturn and Neptune will station retrograde in your 12th house, and until November, December, they will move backwards, right? For Saturn, I don't know if I actually mentioned those dates. For Saturn, it's from June 29th until November 15th, and Neptune is from July 2nd until December 7th. So 12th house is the place of mental health. It's the place of spirituality. It's oftentimes the place of things outside of your control, past karma, sort of karma ripening, right? Things coming into your life that are caused by your past actions, that are meant to teach you something. And so with Saturn and Neptune being retrograde here, you may have to deal with frustrations, delays, or challenges connected to things outside of your control. There might be something wrapping up in your life or something becoming more apparent, right? Some kind of a bad habit, some type of psychological issue, a mental health issue that is yours or someone in your life that you need to address. And so, I don't know why I keep feeling like there's a bug, which I don't think there is, but maybe it's because my dress has an open back. Anyway, so like you may have to look within with this transit. It's already a very kind of like 12th house is the place of hidden things. It's the place of blind spots. So Saturn and Neptune going retrograde here can bring attention to things that you don't notice, but they're actually destructive or unhealthy. It can encourage you to lean into spirituality, to spend more time in solitude, to sort of connect with, a therapist and work on your mental health. They can definitely throw things your way that are outside of your control, remind you of something from the past, and then that triggers the healing process and encourages you to work on yourself. And it can also bring your attention to healing and healing work and helping others and sharing your experience with other people, and perhaps encourage you to figure out how you can better share your gifts with other people. Let me know how this resonates. How has Saturn in your 12th house been from March 2023? Have you noticed it affecting you a lot? And if you want to know more, book a reading on my website, AnastasiaDoesAstrology.com. If you are a Taurus rising, Saturn and Neptune station retrograde in your 11th house. So Saturn is retrograde between June 29th, November 15th, Neptune between July 2nd and December 7th. And for you, here we're looking at the house of friendships, networks, community, your hopes and dreams. And so this could be the time when you're needing to separate facts from fiction, and you're needing to get clear on who your true friends are. Saturn in the 11th is very much the time of, like, it can isolate you, it can separate you from friends, and it can make you feel like a little bit lonely. And so, you know, if there has been any misconceptions, misunderstandings, the two retrogrades at the same time could offer you opportunities to clear them. But it can also be like any kind of glitches, challenges that arise right now in terms of following your dreams, in terms of connecting with your friends, in terms of your social network, your pursuits. They will teach you, they will like show you what is worth investing into and what is not. So in terms of friendships and groups, right? Like, do they offer support? Do your friendships offer support? Do they offer you spiritual sort of value and spiritual fulfillment? And if not, maybe it's the time to find some connections that do, you know, like sort of find friendships that feel more truthful, more real. But yeah, like the retrograde can definitely be the time when there's like a little bit more confusion, and perhaps that confusion is quite telling, and you know, it can help you. Let me know how this resonates, and if you want to know more, book a reading on my website, AnastasiaDoesAstrology.com. Now, if you are a Gemini rising, Saturn and Neptune are going retrograde in your 10th house. Saturn between June 29th, November 15th, and Neptune from July 2nd until December 7th. So here we're looking at your house of career, right? And the two going retrograde at the same time might suggest that you are needing to clarify certain illusions professionally. You're needing to maybe redo some of the work. You're needing to figure out what the problems are and what inspires you. But very much like what is real, what is possible, right? Like, where do you need to double down on things? Where do you need to have more structure? Where do you need to have more focus and, you know, figure out like a plan for yourself, versus where are you feeding some kind of bad habit, bad relationship, bad connection, a delusional sort of belief, right? Like, this can definitely bring like uncertainty in career, but it can also encourage you to connect with the spirituality, to connect with your dreams, to connect with things that inspire you and get you excited. And once again, something might need to be released, but something might need to be focused on. Do not feel like, you know, your dreams are impossible to reach, but do have a structure, do have a plan, and do maybe like examine why you have the fears, or like what's stopping you, what's blocking your progress. Let me know how this resonates. If you want to know more, book a reading on my website, AnastasiaDoesAstrology.com. If you are the lovely Cancer rising, Saturn and Neptune are stationing retrograde in your 9th house. Saturn will be retrograde from June 29th until November 15th, and Neptune is retrograde from July 2nd until December 7th. So 9th house is the place of education, travel, legal matters, writing, publishing, religion, beliefs. It's the place of the higher mind. And higher mind is both your faith, but it's also everything that helps you expand your mind. And that's why it's education, that's why it's travel, that's why it's like religious pilgrimages and even writing, right? So when Saturn and Neptune go retrograde, you are getting an opportunity to clear any confusion. It could be a very spiritual time, because 9th house is a very spiritual place, where you are called to examine what you believe in and to kind of connect with any fears you might have, because fears might be coming up. You might be dealing with a little bit of like, you know, one step forward, two steps back, especially when it comes to like relocation or education or writing or reaching your dreams. There might be like a lot of kind of like internal resistance that comes up at the time, as well as external resistance, right? There might be certain documents you have to resubmit, certain legal matters that maybe stall or feel confusing, certain teachers that are acting a little bit without clarity. And so as always, you know, the retrograde is the time to go within. It is the time to separate truth from illusions. So you might, you know, this might be the time when you're having to be more realistic, when you're having to let something go if it feels very overwhelming, it feels really burdensome. But you may also use this time and all the delays or all the restrictions that it brings, even like fears that come up, use them as like reason to refocus, the reason to restructure, reason to come up with boundaries and have like a plan, and maybe like, you know, lean into spirituality for help, lean into astrology, read books about meditation, read books about Buddhism, connect with spiritual teachers if you feel like things are a little bit confusing and you don't quite know what to believe in, or you know, you don't know what direction your life is taking. Try to find some type of like spiritual support, but also do not give up, right? Like just know that this might be the time when you have to take a detour or be ready to pivot and slow down a little bit. Let me know how this resonates. If you want to know more, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. I can look at your natal chart. I can look at your predictive charts, you know, look at your year to come, solar return, your relationship, and more. Now, if you are the lovely Leo rising. For Leo rising, Saturn and Neptune are going retrograde in the 8th house. Saturn from June 29th until November 15th, and Neptune from July 2nd until December 7th. 8th house is the place of other people's money, other people's resources, other people's kindness and grace, and our involvement with other people. So when Saturn and Neptune go retrograde here, you're having to get clear on what involvements are worthy and which involvements are holding you back. At this time, you may experience frustrations, delays, restrictions that are brought upon by your past mistakes, that are brought by your financial, maybe go with the flow, sort of lackluster mentality. So if there are any restrictions, any kind of financial delays and difficulties, this is your time to come up with a structure. This is your time to figure out a strategy. If you're dealing with any kind of like fears, anxieties over money, right, this is once again a time to face those fears, sit with them, ask them what they're here to teach you. It might be the time when you feel a little bit kind of like you lack freedom, right? Like this could be the time for someone when they just had a baby and they have to stay at home because the baby is really small, and so they rely on the partner to support them, and like stuff might come up. There might be a lot of kind of uncertainty and frustration and recognition of the dynamics that are outdated, that are not supportive, that are holding you back, and like sort of a need to figure out better ways of relating with people. This can also affect your partner's finances. Saturn and Neptune retrograde could suggest that like maybe your partner's finances are getting a little bit restricted, or there are a little bit more fears because you rely on them, and when they go through difficulty, it reminds you of your personal sort of difficulty. So it's an interesting period, right? It's an interesting period, and it's all about like what is worth keeping versus what is not worth keeping, right? Like even in terms of relationships and agreements, this might be the time when you are understanding that some agreements are not meant to stay and some can be worked on. Like, you know, if you have a debt, like you really maybe need to have a structure, but if you have a relationship situation that is unhealthy, this could be the opportunity to like get clarity and set that connection free potentially. Let me know how this resonates, and if you want to know more, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. Moving on to the beautiful Virgo rising, Saturn and Neptune are stationing retrograde in your 7th house. 7th house is the place of love, commitment, one-on-one relationships, contracts, agreements, and business. So Saturn will be retrograde from June 29th until November 15th, and Neptune from July 2nd until December 7th. And this could bring up relationship karma, relationship agreements, relationship fears, relationship illusions, right? And a need to be more structured, a need to be more clear. So, you know, with Saturn and Neptune retrograde here, there might be a situation where like your partner is maybe struggling, or your partner is going through a difficult time, and you perhaps decide to kind of take a lot of responsibility, and then you feel frustrated. So Saturn and Neptune retrograde can suggest the need to be more clear and maybe learn to stand up for yourself, learn to separate. Even like, you know, what this situation reminds you of something from the past, learn to separate that from the present. Maybe having to take kind of ownership of your natural tendency to self-sacrifice, or put yourself second, or like worry about things romantically, and kind of try to be more honest, be more clear, be more direct. Separating illusions from reality, right? If you have a relationship, a situationship with someone that you keep waiting will turn into something important and serious and long-lasting, but it's not, then it creates a lot of fear and anxiety in your life. This might be the time to take those rose-colored glasses off and, you know, put Saturn's glasses on and realize that it will never happen, maybe, right? Or it's not going to happen right now, and you are too worthy, you're too amazing to keep waiting for something to happen. So an invitation to go within and examine what's happening in relationships, and how you can be proactive, how you can be powerful, and what power you do have to make things better, to improve things, to advocate for yourself, I think is very much represented here. Please let me know how this resonates, what's happening in your relationships, how has Saturn affected for you, lovely Virgo rising. And if you want to know more, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. If you are the beautiful Libra rising, Saturn and Neptune will retrograde through your 6th house. Saturn between June 29th, November 15th, and Neptune from July 2nd until December 7th. And this is the time to review your work protocols and your health protocols. Saturn in the 6th house could have created a sense of overwhelm professionally, whether it is because there's just been too much going on, too many heavy weights that you're carrying. That might be because you were dealing with a health crisis or health situation. It might be because you're taking care of somebody else and it feels difficult and burdensome and tiresome. It might be because your boss is micromanaging you or being too sort of restrictive, right? I'm just smiling because I'm my own boss and I'm not micromanaging myself, but I am giving myself too much to do, for sure, and being quite hard on myself. But for some reason or another, there could have been a sense of like too much, too like, you know, kind of confusion, uncertain, maybe some burdens and things that you have dealt with. And so Saturn stationing retrograde and Neptune station in retrograde is very much an invitation to go within and to clarify, what are you committing to? What is truly worth your blood, sweat, and tears? Is it your health maybe, right? Like if you've been dealing with any health issues, if Saturn in the 6th house brought up some kind of like problems, this could be the time when you like focus on your health and figure out a habit structure and maybe bring some spiritual healing into your life. Make sure you're really committed to your meditation, to your planetary practice, whatever it might be, right? if it's work that's been overwhelming, this could be the time when you have to clear some things for yourself. You have to figure out whether it's worth your time and energy. What is worth your time and energy, right? If there are some projects that feel draining, it could be really a good time to like set them aside, to step away and focus on things that create better balance in your life. So it's very much an invitation to examine what is causing you tiredness, what is causing you exhaustion, right? Like what your routines and habits are and how can those be improved. And sometimes the answer is better structure. Sometimes the answer is letting something go. It's not bad if you let something go. It's, you know, your health and well-being is what determines the quality of your life. So having to kind of, you know, reprioritize, uphold your boundaries, speak up for yourself, and introduce better protocols is very much the symptom of this double retrograde we're coming up on. Let me know how this resonates, and if you want to know more, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. I'd be happy to look at your natal chart, talk about year to come or your relationship. If you are a Scorpio rising, Saturn and Neptune are stationing retrograde in your 5th house. Saturn will be retrograde from June 29th until November 15th, and Neptune is retrograde from July 2nd until December 7th. So here we're looking at the 5th house, which is the place of romance, pleasure, and children. And so when Saturn and Neptune retrograde, you may have to deal with the lack of motivation. You may feel a little bit like stagnant and stuck, especially if you've been working on a creative project, if you've been working on, you know, creating a website, starting a business. This might be the time when you are sort of having to push yourself a little harder, or you're having to deal with like certain fears, and even fears related to parenthood, right? Like fears related to becoming a parent, fears related to having your project out in the world. Maybe you are feeling uncertain, maybe you're doubting yourself. And so, you know, this might be the time to kind of recommit, right? Or figure out where those fears are coming from. Becoming more realistic, or having to deal with like challenges that involve your relationship. Maybe, you know, the partner goes through something, or your relationship has to go through a bit of a challenging spot. Having to deal with like parenthood related issues around this time is possible, but also like having to separate your dreams from the reality of life, right? Like maybe you're dreaming about having 5 children, but you realize that you can only afford 2. Or maybe you're dreaming about having I don't know, house with 20 rooms, but you can only afford a 3-bedroom house or something like that. I think there's very much an invitation to like get honest. And also 5th house represents bad habits, right? Like sort of overindulgence, seeking pleasure to a point where it becomes unhealthy and self-destructive. So with Saturn and Neptune here, it's very much like you have to get real about love. You have to be real about bad habits, about children and parenthood, and then let something go, or restructure, recommit, and maybe like with Pisces to have some kind of like spiritual source of support as you navigate like uncertainties, fears, lack of motivation, and stuff like that. And step by step, small steps. Let me know how this resonates, and if you want to know more, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. I'd be happy to look at your chart, your year to come, or your relationship. If you are a Sagittarius rising, Saturn is stationing retrograde on June 29th in your 4th house, and until November 15th it will be retrograde, and Neptune is also retrograde here from July 2nd until December 7th. And so here we're looking at the 4th house, which is all about home, family, living situation. And so these 2 planets going retrograde here can bring delays, can sort of stall your progress when it comes to buying a home, renovating a home, moving, starting a family, moving in with a family, moving out from a family home. And that can also bring up some kind of like, you know, repressed feelings, resentment, frustration, confusion, and encourage you to work on addressing those feelings, understanding those feelings, understanding any fears you have, and also ultimately learning to be more independent. Whether that means from your family or in your living situation, or even like having enough money set aside so that you can, you know, afford what you're trying to do. Fourth house retrogrades can also bring up situations from the past. They can remind you of the childhood wounds. They can remind you of, you know, something that hasn't been healed, something that still needs to be healed. Maybe the past situation that is playing out in your romantic life that is causing you some kind of turmoil, anxiety. It could also be the time when you're sort of questioning what comfort is, I think. And you're having to be realistic about family, home, living situation, because Saturn is all about realism, structure, boundaries, and Neptune is all about dreams. So having to look honestly at what you're dreaming about, and kind of once again figure out what is possible versus what is not. And then maybe some dreams will need to be released. Maybe some past wounds will need to be processed and addressed. Maybe some will need to be recommitted to, right? Like maybe you have a dream about owning a property and it's not impossible, but you need to start saving. You need to kind of get more serious about it. Sometimes with the retrogrades in the fourth house, you may also be looking back at the place you once lived, at the relationships you once had. Once again, you know, past wounds, past challenges, and having to like redefine boundaries, redefine familial relationships. Let me know how this resonates. If you want to know more, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. We can look at your natal chart, your relationship, your year to come, and more. If you are a Capricorn rising, Saturn and Neptune go retrograde in your third house. Saturn stations retrograde on June 29th. Just a sec. Saturn is retrograde from June 29th until November 15th. Neptune is from July 2nd until December 7th. So third house represents communication, neighbors, neighborhoods, siblings, transportation, schedule, community. And when the two planets go retrograde here, you're having to, and also Saturn is your chart ruler, right? So it's not just any two planets going retrograde, but it's your chart ruler going retrograde. You may encounter delays connected to education, connected to short trips, connected to family. You may deal with some misunderstandings, miscommunications in the family. You may sort of feel like there is a lack of clarity when it comes to your upcoming steps, when it comes to starting a business, writing, moving, communicating, and needing to be honest and realistic about what's possible and what is not is also very much like a sign here, because third house is literally the place of like speech and communication, right? And maybe with Saturn here, maybe you're working on something. Maybe you're working on starting a podcast, or you're learning, you're gathering knowledge, or you're planning to start a business. And then when Saturn goes retrograde, something kind of like goes wrong potentially, right? Or some type of roadblock arises. And a lot of it, because it's retrograde, a lot of it is likely to be internal, right? Like certain fears around speaking up, certain fears around having enough knowledge, certain like miscommunications with people around you that make you even question whether you are meant to do what you're doing. I think there is an invitation here to separate the noise from the voices that are important, to not let every single person affect you and every single opinion affect you, to maybe release things that are holding you back. You know, with Neptune especially, there might be certain like illusions, delusions about relationships, around friendships or connections you have that you need to let go of. Maybe they're holding you back, maybe they're dragging you down. And also figure out what is worth committing to, like which dreams are real, which dreams have that sort of profitable, true staying power that you can commit to and invest into and reach. And I could also see this very much like third house being connected to communication, having to address miscommunications, having to address questions surrounding, being heard and speaking up and speaking your truth and not being afraid of being judged, kind of owning your message, owning your truth, owning your opinions is very much important here. Let me know how this resonates, and if you want to know more, book a reading on my website, AnastasiaDoesAstrology.com. Now, if you are an Aquarius rising, Saturn, your chart ruler, goes retrograde on June 29th and until November 15th in your second house, and Neptune goes retrograde from July 2nd until December 7th in your second house. So second house is all about values, finances, resources, possessions, right? And Saturn, I know for quite a few of you, has restricted the cash flow. May have been, could be the period where you don't have as much money available. You may be dealing with some kind of restrictions, people restricting you, people sort of frustrating you. When Saturn and Neptune go retrograde, it's the time to go within. It's the time to understand what is truly important to you and how can you be more self-reliant, how can you be more independent, right? So, and please let me know, how has Saturn in the second house been? I know quite a few of you commented on not having as much money as you would like, or being broke, as someone said. So Saturn and Neptune retrograding in the second house can encourage you to get a handle on your finances quite clearly, right? If you feel unhappy with money, if you feel like there's not enough, if you feel like someone has been not paying you enough, or it's been hard to find a job, use this period to come up with a strategy, do some research, figure out a low risk investment plan, right? So don't hesitate to ask for help as well. And having to be Saturn and Neptune, right? Neptune can create uncertainty, sort of lack of clarity. Maybe you're waiting on someone, maybe you're waiting on a payout to come your way, or you're waiting for your boss to see your value. You may have some kind of delusions or illusions, or even just things that are slowing you down and holding you back. And so with Saturn also being here at the same time, the invitation is to perhaps separate facts from fiction and get more proactive, get more kind of honest, right? Yes, maybe you will get the money that is owed to you. Yes, maybe your boss will see how much you're truly worth, or you will find the job that you want, but what if you don't? You're still going to be okay. And so kind of learning to trust yourself, learning to rely on yourself is important here. And a lot of it also starts from working on self-worth, working on your belief in yourself, about yourself, maybe starting to read affirmations every day, maybe starting to set some money aside, maybe thinking of a plan B if the plan A doesn't work out, is all great here. Let me know how this resonates, and if you want to know more, book a reading on my website, AnastasiaDoesAstrology.com. I do natal chart reading, predictive readings, and relationship readings, so you can ask me any questions you have. Last but not least, if you are a Pisces rising, Saturn and Neptune are going retrograde in your first house of identity, health, physical body. And Saturn is retrograde from June 29th until November 15th, and Neptune is retrograde from July 2nd until December 7th. So first house is all about you. And this is all about illusions and delusions and dreams that you have. And Saturn in the first house has put a lot of pressure on you. There's potentially health matters that you needed to address. There is maybe, you know, certain duties, certain seriousness that life has felt perhaps as like a series of tests you had to overcome. And so when Saturn goes retrograde and Neptune goes retrograde, you are invited to slow down. You are invited to reprioritize and clarify what is worth your time, what is worth your energy versus what is not, and what may need to be set aside and put down for the time being. You may have to be honest about any negative tendencies and bad habits that are affecting your health, that are affecting your progress, that are affecting your image and your even status and reputation. Do you tend to beat yourself up? Do you tend to eat unhealthy? Do you tend to work to a point of exhaustion? Do you need to be better about going to bed at a certain time, setting your phone on silent? You know, what are the things that you need to focus on? It could also be about acceptance, accepting yourself for who you are and not, you know, I think like Pisces people don't talk about Pisces as much as they talk about Virgo in terms of like being very hardworking. But Pisces is very hardworking, and Pisces is a perfectionist on many levels, and kind of that's why you guys are dreamers, because you dream for something better than reality can offer. So a lot of times when reality doesn't add up to what you dream about, you get hard on yourself and you work even harder. So I think part of Saturn and Neptune retrograde in the first house could very much be about getting serious about your habits, your health, structuring your life in the better way. But it can also be about like giving yourself a break and accepting yourself, but then figuring out how can you make your life better? How can you make your life more fitting to who you are within? But also very much like taking better care of health, releasing self-defeating tendencies, releasing any illusions, and maybe recommitting to the dreams that are truly important to you. Let me know how this resonates. If you want to know more, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. I'd be happy to look at your natal chart, your relationship, or your year to come, amongst other things. As always, thank you for being here. If you haven't yet, please subscribe, leave me a like or a comment. I appreciate your support. I appreciate you being here, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.